Alright folks, Min-Max Munchkin back with another video. A couple days ago, basically about a week ago, I announced my online campaign in a separate video, and yeah, so far it's been 3 guys who joined in. But I've actually, one of the comments below the video, one of the people asked, is there a Norse culture? If yes, I'm sold. And then through some back and forth, I realized that actually creating a sort of brief, relatively short video about my world, about my setting, about my campaign, in broad strokes would actually be a very, very good idea. And now, like 6 days later, I'm still thinking about how to do it, and you know me, I can talk forever. But after careful thinking about it, putting some stuff down on paper, actually typing it out in a digital format, I figured that actually I can talk about my world in less than, I don't know, half an hour probably. So in order for you, if you are interested in joining my campaign, that you actually know a bit more details about the world, because this is a homebrew world, and it's not like Forgotten Realms or any other known D&D setting like Greyhawk, Oderon. This is like my own making. So I think it's only safe and fair for you to know what you're getting yourselves into. Now, before I proceed with that, I have to make a quick shout out to the 3 people who decided to hop in right away. Joined the campaign without even knowing what they're getting themselves into. So Andreas, BIGBLACKBANKAI, and Matthew Ewing, thank you for joining in. And all the other patrons, Brad Oldham, Joe, JT, ya boy Fox, Bryan Moten, Sean, Cory Williams, Jeremy Helton, Kyle McPhee, Joel C Alcazar, Will Ketterer, Kevin Aring, Zachary Bradley, Rich Milian, Darth Xín, Gary Course, Matthew Collins, Albert, Kwak, Victor Query, Caleb Ellis, Aidan Harth, Simon Pedersen, SuburbanHell, Blaze Ridge, and finally Frank Fan. Thank you for supporting me so far. Thank you for believing in my channel, for sticking it out with me, right? So yeah, to all of you, there's only 2 days left before I will make a random draw, and 1 or even 2 of this list of the people who have joined at the $10 tier, they will be. So yeah, some of you over here will be randomly drawn. For all of you others who are still maybe on the fence, maybe you here for the first time, or maybe you're just interested in playing in one of my games. Regardless, the special offer for joining my campaign is there's still 2 days left to join. If you can go to my channel, you can open up this video and listen to me talking for like 13 minutes about it. After you're done with that, you can come back to this video and listen to me talking for maybe another, I don't know, 15-20 minutes, talking about the actual world that the actual campaign will be actually going on. A lot of actualities. So yeah, with that intro, with that sort of like segue, let's quickly jump into the actual world. So this is sort of like a map of the world. Yes, this is like a pre-generated map, but I actually did a lot of manual stuff on this map, changing names, obviously. Like you can see from the names, it's like all sort of like mimetic. Names are rather memey, right? Part of the reason for that is some of the names for these worlds were actually given by the players in my home game, because at the time that I was starting the campaign, I didn't have everything ready. I just had like the broad strokes, and actually one of the last things that I decided to do is give names to all of these regions, and I just asked them to help me out. And obviously when you give your players dominion over just one part of your world, well, this happens, right? So yeah, but I actually decided to stick with it. Who cares, you know, like even if it's a little bit cheesy, even if it's a little bit, you know, memey, whatever, it's still okay. I mean, there should be names for the regions, for the countries, and if the names are a little bit cheesy, who cares? So those are still names, right? So first and foremost, we have the region called Deep Steppe, which is this region over here. It's a republic with the power split amongst Baron Destrian as the head of the state, sort of like a president, or I don't know, prime minister or something like that. A large senate and a court of grand judges. Humans are an absolute majority race, but there are a lot of dwarves around the northeast parts in the lands of eternal ice. Now, somewhere starting from Kilkil, I can't even pronounce this. Kilkieldon, there's a line that starts basically something like this. It's a line basically where permafrost, eternal ice begins, sort of like, I'm not gonna say polar area, but definitely areas where ice and snow are maintained for the majority of the year. Basically, northern areas with a much harsher climate and all of that stuff. So yeah, basically that's sort of like the edge over here. So like this would be sort of like a line where it all goes, and it goes like for the majority of the continent. So yeah, basically like this. That's the line where eternal ice is. Everything north of that is where the eternal ice is. So basically, yeah, there is a large population of wood elves residing in this area over here, sort of like southwest. And there's sea elves and other aquatic creatures, races that are common in the Restless Gulf. This is the name of the gulf is Restless Gulf. Other racial minorities also exist, but they are represented in between like 0.1 to 1% of the entire population of the country, of this particular state. Population exists in these northern parts. Again, there's like a large population of dwarves and other races that are acclimated to like northern climate, like harsher winter type of climates where it's always cold. Even during summer, it's like it's not that cold, but it's colder than down south. That's what should be expected, right? So yeah, the the Deep Steppe region maintains good neutral relations with their neighbors. They are actually usually mediating for peace when tensions arise among them. The economy is stable, military force is strong and capable of dealing with most threats to the civilization. Poverty, crime and hunger are more prevalent in the lands of eternal ice, but the south is a nicer place to live, capitalizing on a trade with their rich neighbors on the southern border. Now, these rich neighbors on the southern border, I mean, the region, the country is just called Arcanum Consortium. This is basically where the campaign will start. Arcanum Consortium is an oligarchy with a trading guild at the top. The guild monopolized the import of Arcanium, which is Arcanium from a continent of Horion. So Horion trade route goes to Arcanium Consortium. They basically have the monopoly. All of the trade goes to them, and then they dispatch all of that Arcanium to the rest of the continent. Arcanium is a precious but very dangerous and lethal mineral used to augment and amplify the effects of spells. It doesn't exist anywhere on Oderon like as in its raw form. So yeah, the only way to obtain it is through trade with Horion, which obviously has ample amounts of it. The closest real-life equivalent to Arcanium would basically be uranium, like in real life. Most everybody knows what uranium is. They know what it does. They know of its existence. But if you think about it, like, how many people in the world of like 7.5 billion people actually have access to uranium and even know how to use it safely? We can definitely say not many. A very, very small minority. So that's sort of like similar in this world. Arcanium, everybody, like most people know about its existence. It amplifies magic. It makes it more potent, but not very many people have access to it. And even those that do, they need to know people who know how to operate safely. In other words, they need mages who can cast spells and who can cast spells by using Arcanium and do it in a safe manner without killing themselves and blowing everybody else in the room, right? So yeah, that's about it for the Arcanium. Infighting, corruption and greed is common throughout the guild. the whole country is enveloped in sort of like, I mean, it's an oligarchy, so everybody is fighting for their own place under the sun. Everybody wants to get richer. And for that reason, a lot of immigrants are moving in looking for wealth, prosperity, and better life. Most everything is privatized, with rampant, unchecked, basically like middle-aged version of capitalism, with like high levels of magic and arcanium and shit. So this creates an enormous gap between the rich and poor, like the rich and influential and those that have power. They have like all this arcanium, all this wealth, and all of this power and might, and they are rulers of life and death in this region, in this country. Everybody else is just fighting over scraps and trying to survive, right? So while not officially allowed and even illegal, privatized slavery does exist because money can buy you anything here. And with so much corruption, greed, and basically decadence, there is actual slavery, but it's more like rumors. Nobody actually knows of any slave masters. Slavery is illegal. By law, on paper, slavery is illegal. Petty crime and gangs of thieves and bandits are a growing problem, as the enormous wealth is kept by the select few again, while everybody else is just fighting for scraps that are falling off the table. Private militaries and militias exist in large quantities, allowing the greediest and most power-hungry of the oligarchs to stage conquests. The latest one of the conquests actually happened just like 3 years ago, which is why this particular piece, like here, you can see sort of like doesn't look, compared to all the other countries, states, territories here, it looks kind of wonky, right? That's because one of the oligarchs decided to trek to stage a conquest across the mountain range here, and he just pushed all the way over here. He basically took a large part of the Deadlands over here and claimed it as his own, basically adding it to Arcanum Consortium. Later on, he got killed, and the lands he conquered got added to Arcanum Consortium. So yeah, this is like a big-ass chunk of land that's been recently conquered. So Deadlands have been on the receiving end on this conquest. So Deadlands is basically a loose association of local feudal lords, all united with a common goal of fighting against the warmongering neighbors while still maintaining a modicum of order throughout the whole territory, right? There is no central government. Each region has its own lord, a person with near absolute power over a small piece of land, sort of like in, again, a feudal fashion. And sort of like it's similar to a feudal age in European history. A border patrol, militias, guards, and soldiers and military, they are formed and funded through the cooperation, participation, and agreements between these lords, these leaders. But small-scale wars between these like regional, local lords and warlords, they exist. They are a constant occurrence throughout the country. The population is largely formed from runaways, castaways, cultural or religious dissidents, exiles, high-profile criminals, vagabonds, and others who are not welcome in or even want to get away from their countries and places of origin. Slavery does exist in certain regions, though it's largely frowned upon by the majority of feudal lords. So most of them actually opt to make it illegal, at least on paper, right? Again, similar to how privatized slavery, which is like kept behind shut doors and to like only those that need to know about it, exists in Arcanum Consortium. To some extent, in a similar fashion, slavery exists in Deadlands, but it's more like a local thing. It's not something that's actually legally enforced, or even legal for that regard. Like, so it's like on a region-to-region basis in this whole territory, in this whole country. That's basically how it is. Petty crime and gangs of thieves and bandits also exist, but to a less extent because everybody knows that like if they do bad stuff is gonna happen to them, like in the simplest terms, because once you start making moves against somebody, that somebody is gonna call for help from his neighbor, lord, or whatever. neighbor like gang, bandit lord, who cares? And yeah, basically like everything is kept somewhat tame. But yeah, I mean, obviously when you have like a large concentration of all these castaways, runaways, dissidents, exiles, criminals, vagabonds, you are bound to have at least some problems. So yeah, if you opt to play an exotic race such as, I don't know, Centaur, even Dragonborn, I don't know, all of those races which are sort of considered more exotic, you will most likely be coming from this territory over here. Hair Rock, which is just like a very poor way of me to tying hard and rock into a one word. So yeah, Hard Rock, I guess. It's basically a Dwarven Empire, a typical Dwarven Empire with a little bit less typical monarch. The monarch is actually not an emperor, it's actually an empress, which is called Duzmaira Sephar Mantle. She's at the top, she holds absolute power and control over her lands. It's a mountainous region under a thick blanket of permafrost, similar, as I already told before, somewhere around this is where the line is. So a little bit of this area over here is not eternally under ice, but most of the country, most of the empire is under permanent layer of snow, ice and frost. It's rich in gemstones, there are precious metals everywhere, and there are other luxurious minerals. For that reason there are hundreds of mines, big and small. They exist all the way everywhere throughout the region, and this makes dwarves extremely wealthy. Forging and craftsmanship is highly coveted and sought after by other countries because dwarves make one of they compete with elves to a certain regard, but at the moment they hold a lot of power, they hold a lot of resources. Therefore, enabling them to invest a lot into forging and craftsmanship. Therefore, they actually supply a lot of these neighboring countries and all of the continent with very, very highly coveted and sought after work, weapons, armor, all the other implements, right? All the other crafts and forges. Society is very orderly, crime is severely frowned upon, shamed and draconically punished, oftentimes with death. And therefore the crime is almost non-existent. Shrines and temples dedicated to Tomerus, which is a god of forge and craft in my world, more on that later, are literally everywhere, though not the only ones, as the other deities have their own devotees and followers. Dwarves are stubborn isolationists, they are xenophobes, they are very suspicious and distrusting of other races. Not very not very surprising. I didn't really change that aspect of their usual stereotypical fantastical fantasy type of depiction of dwarves. So yeah, they have an extensive network of walls and fortresses along the eastern border, this one over here, sharing a bloody history with their orcish neighbors. Over there in the territory called, Horde. Orcs, right? Interestingly, orcs are actually the most numerous racial minority in Harrock, with a few pockets of land close to the eastern border, so these areas over here, there are a couple of pockets which are actually entirely under the control of the orcs, but that's only as long as they remain loyal to the dwarven monarchs. Currently, the monarch is Duzmaira Sephar Mantle, yeah, basically, if they decide to rebel, if they decide to go against them, they are sort of almost sure to get wiped. So yeah, finally we have the Horde over here, which is basically a territory which heavily outnumbers every other country on the continent in terms of sheer population numbers. The only reason why Horde hasn't conquered the entirety of Oderon is the fact that hundreds of clans and warlords and tribes throughout the territory constantly wage war against each other. Northern parts are under the year-round sheet of ice, obviously, because the line of ice just goes like this, right? It partially melts during summer on the southern parts of the ice. This part over here, which is most northern, obviously it's like permanently covered in ice. Northern orcs are more rugged and hardy than their southern relatives, but both cultures, the southern and northern orcs, share similar cultures, values, sentiments, and temperaments. Orcs are not really inherently evil, but most end up being so because constant war and conquest makes them familiar with and accepting of darker aspects of life and existence. If you are constantly in war, killing your fellow orcs and other tribes and clans, I mean, you get immune, you get desensitized to violence, crime, rape, thievery, pillage, or bloodshed. So yeah, I mean, this does make orcs somewhat evil, but right off the womb, they are not really evil per se. It's just that their culture makes them so, most of them at least. So yeah, basically tribalism, primitive technologies, savagery, base instincts persevere throughout generations. There's very little progress, if any, being made to improve the living conditions of the clans and tribes inhabiting these lands. Some trade and diplomatic relations exist, mainly with the surface drow, however you pronounce, from the east. Another very cheesy name. But almost every orc is raised and nurtured to hate the goblinoids from the south. Yeah, the names are really cheesy. And dwarves beyond the western border, like the Harrock dwarves. Cults and primitive clerical orders devoted to one, which is a god of war, form the majority of religious establishments throughout the whole territory, but minor following to a few other gods exist as well. We have Skull Crushing here to the south, which is a large empire led by a mighty military junta with 5 hobgoblin grand warlords at the very top. So, I mean, I call it an empire, but technically it's a military junta, however you pronounce. So yeah, being led by like 5 grand warlords, I don't think it can even be called an empire. I just constantly call it an empire. I don't know why. So yeah, basically 5 of those warlords, if it even matters: Molzelon the Blades, Reg the Fury, Egnan the Bold, Glodrovuk the Slayer, and Odrek the Behemoth. They are at the very top of the hierarchy. Bugbears below them form the majority of the elite military units of the goblinoid regiments and armies. Goblins at the bottom of the military hierarchy fill the most of the ranks of ordinary soldiers. So every single hobgoblin goes through a mandatory military training intended to make all of them ready to go to war at a moment's notice. Bugbears and goblins are not required to go through the same regimen, but many still decide to do so due to status, prestige, and benefits provided to them by being formally in the military forces. Religiously, Alalin, Elar, Von, and Fano are roughly equally worshipped, as hobgoblins believe they need the divine blessings from multiple deities in their quest for power and control over the lands to the west and north. Agriculture and economy is under strict control of the military, but fairness and meritocracy are actually the driving principles behind the laws and decrees issued by the military junta, however you pronounce. Yeah, basically, they are not really also very evil, but all of the war and their focus on conquest and the expansion of their territories makes a lot of them evil. But not necessarily. Like, if the goblin is not in the army, if he's not actively killing anybody, if he's just on his piece of land being little and dirty and all like farming his land and all of that stuff, he's just normal, neutral, maybe even good. Like, they have a tendency to being a little bit, you know, like devilish, you know, like sort of like chaotic, I would say, like that, but not necessarily evil, at least not in my world. So yeah, that's what it is in terms of that. And also other races do exist, but only those that accept the goblinoid government. Otherwise, native populations of other races have been eradicated, exiled. Most of the exile actually end up in Deadlands, and basically slain by the many conquests over the centuries. Finally, we have Daisy Woods over here, which is really very, I don't know, it's probably the memeiest and cheesiest of names on this continent. But once again, I left my players to name these territories, and they just decided to pull a bunch of these pranky meme names on me. So I just ultimately decided, you know what, screw it, I'll just keep it. Who cares? So yeah, basically this is a territory of surface-dwelling drow. The drow who grow sick and tired of tyrannical, sadistic rule of the drow, I don't know, matriarchies below the surface. They built their civilization on the ruins and ashes of an ancient high elven empire, which has been wiped away by the civil wars and bloodshed centuries ago. They are still not accustomed to the surface life. They are still affected by sunlight as any other drow would be, which is why their villages, towns and cities, they are built with a very specific architecture that provides shade and full cover from sunlight everywhere you go, right? If you are in the middle of the street, you're pretty much guaranteed to be completely covered from sunlight. There's all sorts of barriers that provide shade and cover from direct sunlight. However, accustomed to harsh living conditions deep under the surface, being above the surface, they actually manage to thrive and prosper above, establishing a relatively peaceful society which cherishes individuality and personal freedom above all else. This is why deities like Tushinan, Iselri and Fëanor are worshipped the most, as their domains align with the goals and principles shared by most of these surface drow. The diplomatic efforts were quite successful in establishing relations with the orcs from the Horde, which enabled the border orc clans and tribes to improve the overall quality of their clansmen lives. So basically, if you ever come across these tribes over here for whatever reason, you will know they will be on a bit higher civilizational scale of improvement compared to the most of the Horde territory. There is still a very disproportionate number of males to females, drow. For every female, there are 5 males. This is largely due to females enjoying higher social status in the drow matriarchies below the surface, rendering most of them content with their lives and causing a lot of the surface female drow to return below the surface, a phenomenon that surface male drow call the Call of Cravaella. Mordors is... There's no territory called Mordors, and the Mordors actually has nothing to do with Lord of the Rings. It's just sort of another one of those cheesy word plays, basically meaning more doors. So doors equals entrances, so more of them, more door. Yeah, you get the point, probably, right? Yeah, my players are very childish. So yeah, this is simply sort of like my version of the Underdark. So throughout all of this continent and even below the surface of the sea, at least you've heard rumors of there existing an entire network of establishments, sort of like towns, cities, villages that are deep below the surface level. Entirely different world with Drow, Darrow, Durgar, deep dwelling monsters and most of the other things you would expect to find in a typical Underdark environment. They exist in my world in a similar fashion. Due to these extreme living conditions, deep below the surface, these populations don't have enough numbers to seriously threaten any of the surface civilizations. Drow are the most dominant race, enslaving and subduing everybody else. Their matron mothers and priestesses fanatically worship Cravaella, the mistress of torment, darkness, terror and madness. Few surface dwellers know the locations and entrances to Mordors, and those that do know of those locations keep them secret. Also, several orders dedicated to guarding these entrances, protecting the surface from the invasion of Drow, Durgar or other below the surface dwellers. Invaders, they exist, but not much is known about them either. Basically, all of these countries have sort of like a secret police equivalent, sort of like elite units, SAS, like Navy SEAL Team 6 or stuff like that. Equivalent to that in terms of like fantasy setting like this, which deals with issues like that, and obviously other dangers, other monsters that would threaten the civilizational establishments. So what does this all mean to you as a party, right? So for one reason or another, if you decide to participate in this campaign, and 3 of you already decided to do so, you will be starting over here in Arcanum Consortium. You will be traveling from Mistlum to Kendor, following rumors of increased demand for mercenaries and adventuring types to deal with the growing number of problems and issues in the region. Based on my experience running this campaign for like almost a year at this point, I would suggest anyone participating in it, all of like 3 people who already jumped in and potentially more, as I draw some of your, as I randomly draw some of my other patrons. Yeah, I would suggest that you make your characters somewhat experienced, seasoned. Don't make them weep every time they see a child begging in the streets, or I don't know, find that when they find themselves in precarious situations. I'm not saying you shouldn't make naive, lawful good characters who are still peeing in their pants and they still see the world in black and white, but the events that will take place very soon after the start of this campaign, they will be harrowing. They will most likely push your characters to the very edge, psychologically, physically, mentally, or in all the regards. Yeah, there will be hilarious, like more relaxed, like what the fuck moments. But the overall setting and atmosphere is sort of like serious. This is, after all, level 1 to level 20 campaign, and maybe even beyond level 20 if you decide that you are ready to test one of those third-party systems for leveling your characters above level 20. So yeah, basically it's a bit grim. The events, the overall happenings around you will lead to a lot of moral ambiguity, a lot of moral relativism. That's sort of like what I aimed to do, and based on what's happening so far in my current home game, I would say I majorly succeeded in that regard. Like my players are very torn on some issues that pertain to the world, that pertain to the events and the actions that they need to take as a reaction to those events. That's why, yeah, I witnessed that party made out of like a bunch of goody two-shoes. They all decided, most of them decided to make like, I'm just gonna be a like good character who cares about the world, wants to do good. One of those guys made a complete 180 degrees change. He basically turned from like the most good guy in the party, or at least one of the most good guys, like goody two-shoe, into a villainous nutcake. So yeah, he basically turned evil. So me personally, I definitely enjoy progressing my own characters. Like when I play in a campaign, I like changing their personalities. I like them morphing with the campaign. But if you don't enjoy that, if you enjoy playing more set in stone characters that don't experience much inner change and turmoil during and after the events that take place over the course of the campaign, I mean, I would suggest make them neutral. It's the safest bet. It's generally the safest bet in most campaigns, making your characters neutral. But I mean, in this particular case, if you make like a good character, even if you make like an evil character, you will be faced with situations where you will be like, okay, what do I do? You know, yeah, I mean, it will get morally ambiguous and relative at some point, at least. At least that's how I think it will get. Maybe for you it's just gonna be crystal clear, and you won't have any problems dealing with any of those moral issues. So yeah, a couple more things. I actually have like my year is differently cycled. So the current year in my world is like 10,367. The moon is called Melun, if that means anything to you. Every month has a 35-day cycle. There's not 12 months, there's actually 9 months. And the days of the week, there are 7 days in the week, and the day does last 24 hours. I didn't really want to change everything. Yeah, basically the day lasts, the days are called as they are called, right? There's like Godseed, Mooncast, Starkeen, Sunvast, Waterlit, Earthbar, Freewilt. I just decided to do it like this. Months are basically called like they are called, they have different names. The names are actually based on the names of the deities. So yeah, the deities are actually, I'm not gonna go through all of these deities in detail, but I will just like put this file on the screen. It's not like there are errors in terms of writing and all of that stuff, maybe some grammar errors, but basically if you pause the video at any point in time, I might actually even put this, I might upload this somewhere in some type of file. I will see, I don't know, like let me know in the comments down below if you need to get this file to check the deities. I'm not against like just sharing this, I don't care. So yeah, basically these are the deities. I have most of the domains covered, because all of these gods, most of these gods have the ultimate dominion over several domains. Yeah, basically there is a couple of gods, namely Frum, which only has domain of time. But overall, yeah, I would say that's about it. Yeah, there's Kravela. She's basically the mistress of the below the surface drow. She's sort of like loosely similar to Lolth, but not really. And all of these gods have sort of like a little bit of their backstory in this file. So yeah, you can definitely pause the video and read through it. If not, if you need the file, just let me know once again. In the comments, I will probably upload it somewhere for your convenience. So that's basically about it. That's as far as you need to know about the world in terms of making your characters, knowing what the heck is going on, where do you start, the overall knowledge that you as a character living in this world knows, right? Yeah, that's about it. There's obviously other things that we will be able to find out, learn, know as the character progresses and events unfold. But yeah, that's about it. If you like the concept, if you like I don't know, the general appeal that I made with this world, well, this is not the whole world. This is just one continent, but similar to sort of like the world of Toril and Ebeir, where you mostly participate in Faerun, which is only like one continent on the whole planet. This is sort of like similar to that. There are actually other continents, but this is the one that you are familiar with, like you never actually left this continent, right? You might have even went through the entirety of the continent, but you never left foot, you never like stepped foot on any other landmass other than this one. So yeah, basically that's about it. If you'd like to participate in this campaign, the special offer is still up for additional 2 days, basically until the end of June, so you still have 2 days left. If you want to play a character from level 1 to level 20, it will take around a year for that, probably less, because in my home game I think my players hit level 20 after like 8 or 9 months. So yeah, basically it's going to be a very, very fast game. There's gonna be a little bit of everything: combat, roleplay, exploration, wilderness, I don't know, stuff like that. A lot of things are gonna depend on you. But if you want to like listen, if you want to like watch this video again, go ahead and watch it, because this video has a little bit more details in that regard. This is more focused and tied around the world itself. Yeah, that's about it. I don't really think there's anything else. So yeah, if you like the video, like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell button. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any questions about, I don't know, if some details that I didn't share or didn't even think are worth sharing. If you want to know them, let me know. Yeah, that's about it. ManMax Munchking out, and talk to you soon.